Sam is Dead, Long Live Sam, a musical New Year's resolutions retrospective by Jacksaw. So this is me talking about my New Year's resolution to write a song a month and the successes and the failings and why I've decided to call it a day on that. So here we are recording this on the last day of June, a song unwritten for June, and the decision to just say like I think I'm not going to continue this project, but I think there's some stuff to talk about in that kind of world. So in terms of structure, we've got 5 sections. We've got we've got context, New Year's resolutions, process, cancellation, and reflection. So kick off with context. Give a bit of an overview of these things. For 2024, I made a New Year's resolution to write a song a month, and that became known as the Sam Project or the Sam Songs, and so any of the music which is related with that has _Sam involved in it in some kind of way. I wrote a song for each of the first 5 months of the year. So from January to May, I wrote a new song and I released a recording of the first 3. So for Jan, Feb, March, we have a song which is available now to stream and for you to check out. So just to kind of give an overview of what those have been, these have been the Sam songs of 2024. So in January, we had Peacock Vow, February, we had Scuttle, and March, we had Colour Me In. We also have April with Boundless, and we also have May with Backbone. Boundless and Backbone don't have recordings of them made yet. I'll talk about that in a second. There is a live recording of Boundless from the show that we just did at the Flute and Tankard, but the first 3, Peacock Vow, Scuttle, and Colour Me In, those are now all available on like all major streaming services, Bandcamp, and so forth. And for context, you might want to consider pausing this video and actually listening to them. First of all, I think they're actually pretty great, but I also think they might be interesting in terms of the rest of the context for this presentation. So that brings us to today, where I've decided to stop writing a new song each month. I'm going to work on making the recordings for those last 2 songs, and those will be the last of the Sam songs. So, I mean, everything's here, really. I just decided this month that I was going to stop, and I didn't want to particularly continue doing a song a month, and I will just spend time making good quality recordings of the last 2 songs of Boundless and Backbone. And just really, really focus on that rather than kind of continuing to make new things. It has been a fascinating project, and I'd like to talk about it with you. That is absolutely true, and that's where we are. So, New Year's resolutions. Let's talk a bit about New Year's resolutions. So the definition, a promise to do something differently in the new year. So thank you, Merriam-Webster, for that definition. Typically within, especially Western cultures, that tends to mean either doing something on a regular basis or making some kind of life change. But it's essentially just a promise that things that you did last year will not be repeated in the next year, or things that you haven't been able to do will be incorporated into your life. They're infamous in terms of their success rate and lack thereof. Here is some figures which are put together by Forbes Health in the article 2024 New Year's resolutions. Nearly half cite fitness as their top priority. This shows us, that only like 1% of people, 1% of people even just drop out before the end of the first month. But, and then sort of 8% drop out in Jan, 22% drop out in February, etc. And then it says about 6% of people stick with it. There's actually a bunch of things wrong with this graph. If I just use my mouse to show, like these 2%. Look at that range. I mean, I know we're talking decimals and rounding, but that's a pretty wide variety of 2% or 1%. These 22s. Also, these numbers don't actually add up to 100, which was really fun. So there's a whole bunch of what would be referred to as graph crimes, and Edward Tufte would have some words about this. So instead, I decided that I was going to make my own version of it. So this is using those figures. So notice right at the end, we actually finish out with 8% here. And this is using a Kaplan-Meier plot. So this is typically more used with survival and drop-off rates, just to show, for example, that we can clearly see that by month 3, we're left with only 47% of the starting set. So that's showing that that's the kind of halfway point, and 25% is actually completing month 5, which is where I am. So I'm in the top quartile of these things, actually, of people succeeding or getting the progress with New Year's resolutions. Again, get to 8% because the numbers provided by Forbes don't actually add up to 100. So whatever, that's why it says 6 there and 8% there. But we'll see shortly that that's actually a kind of figure that gets repeated. Loads of reasons why New Year's resolutions fail. This is just genuinely a cursory putting into Google reasons for failing New Year's resolution. and Google scraping off other people's content to get to these kind of points. These are all totally reasonable. Everyone has their own particular ideas. Stuff like, 2-minute resolutions, if you've not planned ahead, if it's unrealistic, if it's too large, etc. And we'll talk about why the Sam songs failed in that regard. Again, failing isn't necessarily like a bad thing. It's just literally I had intended to do one thing and the outcome has now changed, and that's completely fine. There are also books. Obviously, there are books, and books are good. The only one of these I've actually read is Essentialism, which is actually quite really enjoyed. But yeah, so it would be interesting to check out other ones. Obviously, behavioral psychology is a whole thing, which we're definitely not going to go into. But ultimately, around 8% of people actually manage to succeed their New Year's resolutions, and I'm part of that 92%, and that is completely reasonable and fine. So, as a recap of that, my New Year's resolution to write a song a month throughout 2024, which is what is called SAM. Why did I decide to do that? Starting with why, Simon Sinek laughing in the background here. The main reason that I did this was to improve my music production skills. Like, that's really it. More so even than my songwriting, to be honest with you. It's more about the production. So it's interesting, again, sort of retrospectively looking at it, that it became more about the songwriting rather than the production. So again, stuff to revisit. To learn more about releasing music, just in terms of licensing, just in terms of making sure that everything was registered with the correct bodies, stuff like that is very, very important to be aware of, and to practice, like genuinely just to practice going through and like, oh yeah, this form will do this, or like this, but oh, I've got to put this associated party or stuff like that. It's always really, really valuable, and music licensing is confusing and super important. There's that whole thing about the importance of something is like matched to how boring it can be, and music licensing is 100% in the kind of the dull and ultra important category of things. And then also to ensure that music continued to be a part of my life. So one of the key things for me, especially last year, was noticing that I was spending more and more time doing work and less time doing music, and I wanted to make sure that that balance was addressed correctly. And so for me, that was very much a case of wanting to refocus it and giving a dedicated time target goal. And I'm personally quite goal oriented. I like the fact that it's like, cool, I'm going to do this thing, and so the song a month kind of made sense for that. And as we'll keep repeating, I regret nothing about this project. So let's talk about the actual process of going through it. So the idea was to write a song a month throughout 2024. I cut a slide which is talking about the definition of a song in terms of copyright and stuff like that. But basically, it's just if you have in any way recorded, like put down on paper or recorded a song, then that is, that's it. It exists. So I wanted to create something. But in reality, this became a case of writing the music, writing the lyrics, learning to play the song. Really underrated part of this project was the fact that I actually had to, learn to play the things that I was writing. Recording it all, doing all the arrangements, doing the production, everything, the mix, the mastering, designing the artwork. So I did all of the artworks as well. That was kind of a nice thing I did as well to practice that side of things. I decided to record an acoustic version of the song as well to kind of accompany it. So I had the actual the main song and the acoustic version. And then I decided to arrange the song for the live band because I've got this. Jacksaw is, Jacksaw is a live band. Essentially it's a WhatsApp group of a bunch of my friends. And realistically, it's a case of I wanted to whatever song I was writing to play that in the rehearsal that was at the end of each month as well. It just felt like it kind of solidified it. Publish the song to streaming platforms, register with the licensing bodies, promote the song. Promotion we'll talk about shortly. Update social media and which is kind of tied to promotion, but somewhat slightly distinct. And then to enjoy the entire process. Really, really important. Really important to try and enjoy it. And so from that kind of basic write a song, it sort of spiraled out into quite a lot of, this. It was a scoping. There's a scoping problem of this, the fact that there are so many facets that we just cover by write a song. So in terms of the actual writing, my process, I've written many songs and the process changes each time, and it's really fun to practice that and to change different ways. On the left, we've got like the actual, so these are the phone recordings, just like voice notes. It's really interesting actually looking through here and like noticing, so So first of all, if we look at the end of February, I have this thing called Bode, which I really really liked, and I'd completely forgotten it existed. Even a little start, but that does not exist and hasn't been made into a song. But from the beginning of March, for example, we have this sort of change from a song called Wisp, and then another version of this song called Wisp, and then I eventually renamed that to be called Coloring In, and then that eventually became Color Me In. And that was really interesting to again sort of see the voice note progression of how that kind of had evolved. In general, I tried to get the song like written in terms of like it from beginning to end and everything sorted by about the 10th to give me time to sort out the rest of everything. Plus, it's just sort of like a mental little job. Writing the actual music, sorting out the arrangements and stuff like that. This is actually a bit of the song Boundless. This is like, I believe this is the flute part. Again, it's nice to write. I really like writing stuff on paper. I really like sort of manuscript. It feels good. And then on the right, we've got the actual. This is me having kind of made a lead sheet. A lead sheet is just like tune and chords. And this is for Color Me In. And this was what I use for practicing. And like again, I like having like a physical artifact that I can then like scribble stuff on. And the top right, this is really fun. Color Me In uses every major chord, and this is me going through and checking that I've actually gone through every major chord. And then right at the end, because it finishes at this word alive, and then I like looked at what chords I hadn't used, and so that became what was used in the outro to make sure that song has all 12 majors. Just little things like that just make me chuckle. Anyway, so here we are. In terms of the lyrics, again, lyrics, there's loads of different approaches, loads of different scribbles, loads of rearranging, scribbling out, crossing. Here we see like coloring in, and then that would be like evolving into color me in and stuff like that. I think this bit here like was the first of the page. It says the word like malaise festoons, and that's sort of there's all sorts of really exfoliates my joy. Ah, beautiful. And there's got to be a point where you're just kind of allowing yourself to just write phrases or write words and kind of see what comes out of that. And then I quite like to sort of go through iterative of like, okay, so here's it on paper, and then here's a printed out copy, which I can then use and then scribble out. I think this is even me writing verse two, and then like practicing, like writing different sections and trying stuff out. Like again, lots of physical media, lots of physical back and forth. For me personally, rather than just recording directly into DAW and to digital audio workstation, which is what we'll see next. So I use Reaper. This is my digital audio workstation of choice for recording. Here we've got the project for Scuttle, and we've got the project for Peacock Val. And the long and short of it is that they're quite in depth. There's quite a lot of tracks here. There's quite a lot of different parts. And then and again, in terms of the scoping, what was problematic, I guess, for finishing the project was, or like why I've decided to stop it, just because of how much detail there was, how much detail I wanted to put into it, and wanting to spend the time doing that properly. It was really, really important to me, really important. But here we are. So these are the kind of these are what the projects look like. One of the failings, and I genuinely actually think I might have forgotten to mention it later on, but it's the case, or put it into the PowerPoint later on, is the fact that there was so much behind the scenes stuff that I wanted to do, like so much, hey, check out this bit where I did these, like, have you noticed this effect here, or this thing's going on here? Wow, there's some crazy voice leading going on, and all these like little intricate, essentially like jokes to myself. That I really wanted to spend more time showing, but I ended up not doing because, again, time is a factor here. Anyway, but recording and producing the songs is a very, very real part of this. Who would have thought? Then we've got the band arrangements. So I typically use a typesetting program called Dorico. And so on the left, we've got the like one of the parts for the song Scuttle. So the Jacksaw band, in case anyone isn't aware, and you should be aware, you should make yourself aware. It would be cool if you were aware of this. Is largely two flutes, two mid-range B-flat instruments, so be that clarinets or trumpets or tenor saxophones, piano, bass. We've got cello now as well. Backing vocals will be like one of the flautists typically. And so that means that I try and write, once I've kind of made the song, like if we go back, like Scuttle's obviously got all of these parts. Actually, Scuttle was interesting because I did do the arrangement and then exported out the audio. It's something that I learned from Anna Meredith, who spends a lot of time like much of I think it was Varmints anyway. Varmints, the record that was so tightly written in for her case Sibelius, but like um, and then exported in. So like a lot of time was spent here, and so I kind of took that approach as well for Scuttle. But that was actually quite uncommon. Quite a lot of the time, it was more or less just throwing MIDI, like recording, like you see kind of this random set of just keyboard chords here and stuff like that going on in Peacock Vow. And then I'd kind of retrospectively go back and go, okay, so how is a human going to play this, for example? I think Peacock Vow was the most kind of like, there is no way a human can actually play this, so let's do like a human performable version of it. And like, that's a really, really important part of the process. And then and this is just on the right, we've just got like the actual sheet music showing these parts and like little little alterations and stuff like that. Standard stuff, nothing too crazy here. But again, this was part of the Song a Month project. This is something that I was doing as part of the monthly creation. Then we got the rehearsals. Again, not necessarily important for the Song a Month in terms of the release. And again, this is why we're sort of going into that scoping problem of losing track of the actual intended purpose. That music production, like a rehearsal doesn't necessarily help with the music production, but it helped me creatively. It helped to actually practice the parts, hear it in situ, come across any sort of issues, and just feel what the song felt like to actually perform it in the livest setting I could do. Was really, really good. But again, if you're looking to really dissect what you could remove, that's a pretty clear one. Because ultimately we actually perform the songs. So here, hilariously, all three of these are entirely unplugged open mic events. Top left is from A Little Man Coffee, and the other two are from Flute and Annie at the Flute and Tankard. And ultimately I wanted to perform the songs that I was writing, so that wouldn't have been possible without the rehearsals, which wouldn't have been possible without doing the band arrangements. So even though the actual focus had been on the production side, reality is important. It was really important to make sure that the songs didn't just live on like my laptop or whatever. Like it was to make sure that they were performable artifacts. Again, I hadn't really considered that hugely when I started the project. Just something that it's just another thing which got in the way of the perpetual creation, but is something that I in no way regret. Like something that I'm very, very proud of, and I love that we did it this way. And the artwork, I think, is really, really important, like in an underrated way. These are, first of all by me, which is, again, I have on and offly dealt with the artworks of things, especially during the Albatross archive era. That was all like a guy called Tom Kitchen, who I love very much, and I caught up with the other day, and so I hope to work with them on some other things shortly. But these were the first artworks which ever had my own face on them. None of the other, either Richard Jackson or Rich Jackson or Albatross Archive or any other creative project I've ever done has my face involved in them, and so that's why they are all three like versions of my own face, or like a warped photo, or a line drawing outline of a photo and stuff like that. And like that was really important from a kind of self-confidence, self-esteem perspective for me, trying to embrace myselfness as the creator is something that I'm really uncomfortable with, something that I'm actively working toward. And it's very much a kind of, well, we're just going to use my face then. That's going to be a thing. That's been, honestly, like an underrated part of this project has been the artwork. So I just wanted to give that a bit of a platform. And obviously I learned loads about graphic design. I mean, typically these are like first drafts of things. Like I did this Scuttle thing is, oh cool, I can like do a warp map of this image, and we just like scribble it around. Like cool, great. Or like, oh, here's some nice reflections. Or okay, how would we do a line drawing? And I swear I just did this while like watching an episode of something, and I just like, okay, there it is. All right, we're just going to use that then. Fine. And typically these are all done in like an afternoon, and they're just interesting things to do in a discipline that I'm not typically super familiar with. And I used Affinity, Publisher, Designer, and Photo for these, just in case anyone's interested or is looking to jump away from Adobe and their increasingly questionable user license agreements and permissions and all of that jazz. One of the things that I also decided to do, and this is super, super simple, was just to make, I really can't remember where I got the idea, was just to also release instrumental versions of the songs. So like So what ended up being the case was that the songs, when I released them, would be the song, an instrumental version, and the acoustic version. I thought that was just really interesting. I think a lot of that was to do with. Yeah, there we go. Let's just stick with that. I think one of the ideas behind this was. Sorry, let's go through this in order. So, yeah, it was super easy to do. I just muted the vocals and I rendered that. And something I would like to have done, and I'm really interested in looking into ways of doing, is to create stems, like the actual groupings of instruments, to like sort of give. Here they are. If anyone would like to do any remixes, if anyone uses samples, credit me. But other than that, go free, like whatever. And so that's one of the things I'd like to have done. I think the instrumental versions came from the idea of that just because I was sort of interested in the production side of things, and I tend to, and I'm really working hard to improve my mixing skills in general. But one of the things was just to acknowledge how much space in the mix the vocals took up, and how much complexity there was behind the vocals. Because in an ideal world, when you're able to actually like mix properly, I mean, the ideal is that you can hear everything and it has its own set place, its own pocket of sound, and that's just not an area. That's just not where I'm at. And so I felt it was a nice way to sort of support all the work I was doing on the other parts by removing the vocals and just sort of going, by the way, this is what it actually sounds like underneath. Yeah, it was an interesting idea, and I really like that I did it, and I actually really like some of the instrumentals as well. And obviously, they're good for stuff like sync licenses and for TV, etc. But we try not to think about that at this particular moment, but still relevant. I think honestly that was where this idea came from. I think it was a chat with some musician friends of mine have like a support group, basically, including Annie of Ostel, whose much I'm rapping. And I think we're chatting about sync licenses and making sure you had an instrumental version. Sync licenses are basically where you allow TV or other media to use your music. So if ever you hear like a song, or it's that song, that's because in like an advert, it's because a sync license, a synchronization license has been secured for that, and it's just much easier to do that with an instrumental version as well, because it just gives the flexibility, right? I genuinely hadn't forgotten that until I've just been talking. So let's just keep that in, and that's the reality. Anyway, point being, I really like them. I think they're super cool. The acoustic versions, so I've chatted about them a little bit. Yeah, I made these acoustic versions at the same time. These are all live recordings. The one for Peacock Vow, the January one, that is just literally my phone recording. I'm in my pajamas. There's just a jumper on top. And these were really fun to do. Again, having sort of been hyper focused in this sort of Door's digital audio workstation, like kind of Reaper and stuff like that. Really focused on that music production side. It was nice to then go, okay, let's do just a guitar and vocal version to just sort of, I guess, ground it. I think it's one of those things that I like, the sort of songs which can be reduced to this kind of bare bones like that. And that was really important to do. Generally, like I would do, I think Scuttles was recorded like first take straight after I'd got home from doing the rehearsal of Scuttle. And yeah, it's really nice to have done. But again, another part of the project. Publishing, yeah. So I use like platforms like Amuse to distribute onto, say, like Apple Music or YouTube Music or any other major streaming service. And then you register the songs with like PPL and PRS, and you sort out all the ISRC codes and all this kind of malarkey. Again, I think it's a really undervalued part of music release, is to be aware of how to handle your licensing appropriately. I've got friends who've really had struggles with ISRC codes, and especially when other people publish it and then they make mistakes and it really spirals out of control. So that's been fun. Shout outs to anyone that's happened to. And then like the last side of the kind of process part was these lyric videos. So I've got one of my closest friends, a guy called Matt Creed. He's an animator, freelance animator, incredible. If you need animation work, do give him a shout, because he is incredible. He has been helping put together lyric videos. So basically the process would be, say, I'd write a song in January, in this case Peacock Vow, and then by the end of February, Matt would do a lyric video for it. So it was always kind of working out of sync, sort of like staggered, offset by 1 month. And so currently we've got two. We've got Peacock Vow and we've got Scuttle. Color Me In's is in the works right now. But again, life's been very busy for both of us, and it's a thing that we'd both like to do, and that he's very interested in doing. But ultimately, there's no real rush, and it's completely fine. And I think we're going to come to the there's no real rush part of things pretty soon. Yeah, and so Matt's been doing these, and so the idea is that once all of the 5 tracks are done, which I'll talk about in a second, we're gonna release like try and like book out space at Chapter Arts, which is a local cinema, and to actually put on a screening of all 5 of them as kind of a launch for that. But I'm jumping ahead somewhat. Let us continue. Because we're now going to talk about cancellation, the reason why this New Year's resolution, why I decided to call it. So after 5 months, 5 songs, and 3 releases, I decided to cancel the Sam project. So that is where we're at. I decided this about a week ago, and I felt much better as a result. So let's talk a little bit about that. So some of the key reasons. Yeah, let's go for this. So some of the key reasons. So I started building up this backlog. I really didn't like the fact that I had 3 songs which were released and 2 songs which weren't. That was starting to grate on me because I really like the 2 songs which aren't released, and I want to put the time into making full produced versions of them. I also, one of the reasons that track 4, so Boundless, because Boundless is basically like 80% done, like I have been working on it, but I got really interested in doing some other things, and those other things I didn't have the time to do correctly. It's like, oh, I'd really like it to sound like this, and I just didn't have time, and we'll talk about time shortly, but I didn't have the time or capacity to get the song sounding like what I would like it to, and so I just didn't, and that's that. And so it's a case of that's when I first was like, I can't release the actual song, and that backlog has only increased. We've now got 2. If I'd have finished this month's song, we would have 3. And I don't like the idea of being kind of like the avalanche of unfinished projects is very, very it's a very suffocating experience for sure. And so I just didn't want that to happen. I really wanted to focus on the production. And again, like, this is one of the failings. This is one of the things of the point of the retrospective, is that remembering that starting point of wanting to improve on the production side, there's been an awful lot of things of this which have been completely unproduction related, and thus adding more things to the pile just gets us further and further away from the production side, and that's ultimately what I wanted the project to be doing. And the final thing is that I just didn't want to rush it just for the sake of arbitrarily completing some challenge I'd made for myself. Like, there was a purpose, there was a function for it, but I also didn't need to. And it was a sort of diminishing returns thing. I don't want to just release subpar material. Like, there's an element, like, I don't mind the sort of learning curve for the Peacock Valve, for Scuttle, for Color Me In. And I generally think there is an improvement in quality throughout. But then if I don't have time to implement that, then it's a balancing act, right? It's a balancing act between just release the first draft and never releasing it because of perfectionistic decision paralysis, which is, again, a completely reasonable and normal way. And we just have to find our own... Sorry, I'm just trying to use a camera correctly. Our own mid-ground. It's the just enough kind of principle, right? And for me, I wasn't getting to the just enough, just good enough, I should say. So... and in general, in terms of reflecting on the project in terms of a New Year's resolution, it ultimately became too ambitious to create within the available time that I had for each month. The importance of the outcome became a restriction, and I think the next part is here. The importance of the outcome. So basically, I started noticing, and I'm pretty sure there's a slide later on where I talk about this, of the fact that I started to recognize that I wanted to release the songs as like a larger project, as like an EP or an album or something like that. And I didn't want... No, what's the way to put it? So it's meant, because I was starting to view the songs I was doing in terms of as a larger project, I then couldn't just release stuff. It had to be fitting into that project. And that was really quite suffocating, even in terms of like the chronology of it. Like, oh, okay, we can do track 1 is January, track 2 is February. So that means that you started thinking in terms of the arc and the flow. It's like, oh, you've done this kind of song. That means you have to do this to balance it out. And then you start having this lineage. And the point had been that it was just these set of essentially disconnected objects. And so I started putting more importance on it, on the songs and their interrelation, their interdependencies, and that again added more constraints, and that was also difficult to kind of balance out. Yeah, and I've really said this before. They're not wanting to compromise the quality for quantity, quantity for quality. I'm not wanting to compromise quality for quantity. That is the sentence. Point being is I wanted the songs to be good. I didn't want a lot of things. I just wanted the quality to be better than I was able to achieve. And this is exactly what I was talking about. So the unintended importance and the scaling issues. So the more I wrote, the more I wanted to make an album. Instead of individual tracks, they're part of a project. And I sort of thought about it in terms of a 4-track EP. And I thought, like, oh, cool. So I can, like, release, like, the first 4 tracks as EP1, second as EP2, third as EP3, and then maybe put them all together. And I think it's poignant to me that the fact that song 4 of month 4 was the first song that I couldn't release, because in my head it had to finish up this set of 4, and it just didn't land correctly. It didn't quite work correctly for me. And again, it's about that, the interdependency and building up that restriction. That became really interesting. That was a unexpected problem, which I thought was really interesting to encounter. But there we are. Again, something to be aware of for future things in terms of whether or not it's just writing a song, or whether or not it's like, hey, now we're writing a song. How about we're putting together an EP? How about we're putting together an album? Again, it's the scoping and it's the scaling. It's the gradual, we're adding more importance that becomes a problem. And one of the other things is that outside of outside of music making, I was being really successful at my day job of tech and of doing talks. This is the end of April. Again, this is the song that I couldn't release, that I didn't have the capacity to, because on the Wednesday I was doing a talk in Bristol. On Thursday I was giving the same talk in Wales for Umbercomrie. On Friday had a film premiere, which I'll talk about shortly, for a film that I did the audio for. And then on the Saturday I went back to Bristol to do a completely separate tech talk. So I also had to write 2 different tech talks and sort out the music for a film while working full-time while doing this project. So it's not really a huge surprise that April is the month that things fall apart. Like, it's again, it's something to recognize and to be appreciative of, that's just the reality of it. I was giving talks, giving talks, doing a film soundtrack, and I was also, I was receiving awards and stuff. So that's what this image is. So this is the fact that at the beginning of June, so obviously we skipped May, but still, this is me receiving an award. Umbraco Most Valuable Person, or Most Valuable People. There are 100 in the world, of which I'm now one. Umbraco MVP, which is presented at Code Garden in Odense in Denmark. I am there, walking up onto the stage, just right there. But still. But while this wasn't like a huge time sink, so to speak, it's an illustration that I was doing lots of things outside of work, because my job has very little to do with Umbraco, but I was still so recognized by its community for doing stuff that I am an award-winning MVP. That's a real sign of how much stuff I was doing outside of work for it. And again, that was time that wasn't being spent on the SAM project. So again, there's an essentialism perspective of going like, okay, well, you have to view what is important. And this was important, and the music was important, but what I decided was the importance could only go so far for the song a month, and it wasn't so important that I was going to jeopardize other things. So again, it's a case of prioritizing. Life is curation. Who knew? At the same time as this, I decided to also spend my Mondays, and I've been doing this slightly, like, from about the end of November. Again, this is part of the building up music being in my life kind of perspective, is to add in, so every Monday I write some music. So it's generally about a minute's worth of music, take me about an hour, and it tends to be a looping thing. So like it'll be an hour loop. sorry, a minute long loop, I should say, written in about an hour. And I do that every Monday. So again, other things that I was doing, self-imposed, which were creative projects, which didn't have anything to do with the song a month. So again, that still just takes up another night of the week. And, and that does rack up. It does take time. Gets you better at using, again, my DAW, using Reaper, but so be it. And the film that I was mentioning is this 48-hour animated film called Pinata. Basically, as part of Cardiff Animation Festival, there's a thing called Quick Draw, Cardiff Quick Draw, which was a 48-hour filmmaking competition that I did with the aforementioned Matt Creed. And so I did the sound design for it. Also, on the day of it, I did attend, like, on the Saturday we were writing stuff, and then on the Sunday I ran a 10K in Cardiff and then got home and then did this. And this was in April. Again, April, the month where stuff stops. And this charming little image on the right is from Matt's behind the scenes video he did the other day. And that just made me very, very happy. So I felt it needed to be included. And honestly, when I look back, obviously there's a lot of things that I could have done better and improvements and stuff that I could have broken down more, or at least kind of identified. I think one of my key failings, my absolute kind of like parts which doesn't work or didn't work, or that I really struggle with, is marketing and promotion. So in terms of even just creating content, I wanted more behind the scenes stuff, more promotion in general, more pushing for blogs and reviews, more attention, more. And it's this idea that, like, when very recently in the past week, a friend of mine was like, "Hey, could I get like a copy of that song you were talking about in your March song?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." I mean, okay, it was Matt. So Matt was like the animator. He was like, "Cool, I'm getting around to doing the video. Can you send me a link to it?" Or like, can you send me the file? I was like, "Oh, here it is on Spotify. Here's a Spotify link for you." And he's like, "Oh, I didn't realize this was online." And it was one of those things that obviously he had stuff going on in his life, and that's completely fair. But I used that as a kind of, I'm really not advertising this well enough. And I speak to so many of my friends in real life, in the outer net, who have no idea that I'm doing this, like, who have not been aware that I've released a song every month. Especially my musician friends, like, again, in terms of circles of people, and sort of what social media you would hope would be pushing towards certain people, very, very unaware. So while publicity isn't necessarily the be and the end all, it's still, I think, in terms of the things that I really wanted to have done more, it was the marketing and the promotion. But ultimately, that has nothing to do with the initial goals. That's nothing to do with those whys. There's nothing to do with improving production or incorporating music, etc. Like, I put this as a key failing, but realistically, it has nothing to do with the actual project. But it's funny how that's how it feels, having done it. And it's always that, the moving of the goalposts, oh, I've done this, how about doing this? How about doing this? How about this? And, again, that scaling, that scoping is really problematic, or was really problematic, I think, for the reasons why this project, why I just was like, nope, I can't. But, of course, there are myriad issues, and I think we've covered the majority of them. And then just a little side thing of efficiency over artistry. So when I was doing this, I very much was thinking in terms of the way to address this is the way that, okay, let's go through these points. So this part here is saying that, especially this month, I had like about a week or like week and a half, about 10 days to put together the song that I was going to do for this month. And because I had so little time, I was like, okay, what's the most like minimalistic, simple thing do I just do? What sort of texture? Is it like a really simple piano thing? Is it a piano instrumental? Is it a guitar and vocal but really, really thin? Is it an a cappella thing? And then the more I think about it, the more complicated it would get. And then the more it's like, I don't have time to do these ideas. And so for me, it was a case of wanting to, of being concerned that I was viewing the choices which I could deliver versus the quality I'd like to deliver. Like, it's more a case of, again, getting something done, churning out the content, so to speak, versus actually creating the music that I wanted to. And that was a real problem. That was a real kind of, I think that was a massive red flag when I noticed that I was thinking in those sort of terms, like, I don't think this is how we want to go about stuff. There is the standard thing, kind of the idea from, and I just middle of presenting. I can't remember their name, but you know, the producer for Zelda and for Mario, etc. Who, you know, with the idea of a delayed game or a delayed anything. I mean, this is the point. It's a delayed thing is eventually good, but a rushed thing is forever bad. And I think this is a really interesting idea, especially in a culture of like patching and of sending updated versions or like day zero patches, which is such a common thing. Oh, we're going to release it broken, but it will be fixed. Is so bad. Like it's just it's so terrible. Even in terms of definition of done, even in terms of knowing when something is complete. Like it should, when you release it, it should be finished. Like that is a thing that is there. Um, yeah, I mean that's again, many people have different opinions. Digital content is what it is, etc. But I think from an artistic perspective, I take that quite seriously. And yeah, and it was just this idea that kept sort of haunting me essentially, and that culture doesn't scale well, and that's okay. This is very much about the way of production, like it's a quality versus quantity thing. There's a lot to be said for that particular point, but ultimately it's about the way that to create lots of things, it's not necessarily going to be the same quality of stuff. Andy Warhol would have opinions, and that's fine. Everyone has different opinions and everyone has different approaches, so be it. So, final part, reflection. Learnings. Some of the learnings for here. I got so much better at using Reaper, like so much better. Reaper Dawn, so digital audio workstation, the program I'm using for actually making the music, producing the music, so good, so valuable, and I really, really do value the fact that I'd given myself the time to just sit down. In fact, one of the things I've even been doing in the past, honestly, this month, isn't so much music making, but more just learning how to use Reaper to do stuff or to make certain sounds or to automate in a certain way. It's been really undervalued to just sit down. Again, it's just fluency. It's just practice like an instrument, like this piano that's here. You know, it's just practicing of that. Software practice, I think, is really underrated in terms of like, you know, grade 1 Reaper, grade 5 Reaper, you know, etc. Like, I think it's really, really underrated. I do feel my mixing and my production skills are increasing. They've got a ways to go, but I do think they are improving. And again, that's a really great thing. It was really, really interesting to only focus on one song for a whole month and be like within that song. Like when it worked, especially for Color Me In, like I've still got some sketches up on my board. Color Me In, that was really nice to just focus pivotally on that one song for a bit. I was so grateful to myself for being able to just do that. And just to live and breathe like a single artifact was really great, really enjoyed. And it's just a chance to try different styles. And so it's like, I'll do it this, like, oh, now I'm going to do this. Or, oh, no, I'm going to try this. And, oh, I'm going to do this, like, ludicrous guitar solo of noise. And then this time I'm going to, like, do an entire song where all of the piano parts are like recorded at double speed and halved and then slowed down by an octave, which is Color Me In. Dude, check out the piano parts for Color Me In. I think that's so interesting, and I think they sound really interesting, and there's a whole bunch of unique reasons for recording it like I did, which I didn't have time to really communicate. And again, I think the educator in me really wants to be able to share more of this kind of stuff as well. And writing to deadlines is always valuable. Obviously, I've sort of been talking about the way that I didn't just want to do it for the sake of doing it, but I also think if you are able to, it's an invaluable skill, especially for anyone who's looking to do any sort of media work or any sort of work where your music contributes to a larger project. The more people you work with, the more important deadlines are. If it's your own stuff, you do what you want. But the more that you engage with other artists and other people and any sort of things, the more important it is to acknowledge the importance of deadlines. And yeah, that's kind of that. So if I review the initial whys that I started off this with, to improve the music production skills, learn more about music, releasing music, to ensure music is a part of my current life, like honestly, absolutely. I am so proud of achieving these 3 things. Like, this is what it boils down to. I had these goals, and even though I did not complete this full like 12-month cycle, I have achieved what I wanted to. I will continue to achieve what I want to. I will continue to improve my production skills. I will eventually release tracks 4 and 5 and then things in the future. And I do think that this project has been instrumental in terms of ensuring that music has been part of the things that I do in a way that I felt more disconnected with it over the past year or two. There's definitely a word or two missed there. Point being is I've felt I've reconnected more with the artistic self, and especially given the amount that I do for my day job and the hilarious successes I'm having in that world. I think it's really, really important for me to kind of like to ensure that it's there because it's quite important, and you know it's the stuff that I would like to do more of and be better at doing. So, the future. What happens next? Aiming for a 5-track EP, potentially called something like the Sam Songs, because it's 5 tracks, and specifically because of Color Me In being in the middle, it gets this really fun idea of mimicking a Bartok string quartet, which, like on a basic level, there are many wonderful things about them, but have like the central movement being that kind of like Nacht music or the night music movement and stuff like that. And Color Me In is like I think a really fun example of that. So anyway, that just makes me happy. We don't know how it'll turn out, but that's kind of an idea. I want to promote it properly. Again, I talk about the promotion. I want to work with people. I want to work with good people to help make sure that people are aware that it exists and will listen to it and critique and give me criticism and tell me the things they don't like or tell me the things they do like. But either way, to at least talk to me about it, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Yeah, like I kind of said earlier, the idea is to put on an EP launch or a listening party accompanied by visuals that Matt Creed did or is doing, and to make that into kind of like a cinematic 5-part thing. Again, it would be really beautiful to work with Matt on this kind of project. I really look forward to it. This is something that I'd love to happen. So we'll see. Look for performance opportunities. This again, really going to be pushing, especially for next year, I think. Really pushing for festivals, really pushing for performance opportunities. Because, like, the material's there, the band's there. I love my band so much. They are the greatest people, and it's such a joy to just be able to do the stuff we do. But yeah, really going to push for performance opportunities, which again comes from the promotion of the EP and stuff like that. And then probably aim for an album for next year. Like, a couple of thoughts, a couple of different directions, but that's kind of an idea to at least do that. Then we will see. And so that is that. Ultimately, I am so proud of the music I have made so far in 2024. The Sam project to me has been a huge success, and while there are certainly things that I would have done differently, moreover, I think the reasons that it failed, the reasons that I didn't complete the project in terms of like the New Year's resolution-iness of it, are entirely understandable. I think there's one thing to say, oh, I just messed it up, versus look at the following completely realistic reasons why this wasn't ever going to be possible. Or at least it might have been, but then you did the following things, and that then scuttled it, that then kind of like brought it down. And that's okay. I learned a lot from the project. I am so proud of the project. I'm so proud of the Sam songs. I'm so proud of myself for having done it. It's a real victory, I generally do think. So ultimately, Sam is dead. Long live Sam. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider listening, subscribing to this channel or to my music or Bandcamp, YouTube Music, Apple Music, other major streaming services. It would make the world of difference. It would be really, really helpful for me. Take a listen to the songs. Let me know what you think about them. Let me give me feedback. Give me the things you don't like, the things you do like. Just, it would be lovely to connect more with people on these projects that I'm doing. And so I hope this relatively long PowerPoint has given some sense of why, and maybe you might consider doing something similar yourself. And if you do, let me know that as well. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Thanks so much for watching.